Adriana.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this morning study that we had and a deeper look at the patterns that are before us, the people we're going to go to, and the fearlessness that we have to have within us to do the work. Lord, strengthen us and help us to rely on you fully and to put our faith in your hands, that you will guide us and lead us all along the way and strengthen us to be able to withstand any privations or hardships that may come our way. Help us even now, Lord, to be able to understand how to cope with these things and to be happy all along the way, no matter what, knowing that you are here, you're helping us, and you will take us through until salvation. We thank you for the meeting we're about to have. Help us to have strong, clear minds and to be able to understand these lines and the message. And we ask that you continue to be with us through the rest of the day. Bless the speakers and the teaching that's going to come out of their mouths. Lord, help us to be able to understand it and keep it in our hearts, and to keep accumulating more understanding and knowledge and parable teaching and understanding. We thank you for this awesome privilege and responsibility, and we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. So hopefully everybody stick around with us for the afternoon study as well, because we're going to want interaction from everybody on the going back into 2 Samuel 22. Let me get the notes up for this study. Okay, everybody can see? And here, you guys can hear us, right? Somebody?
Yes, we can hear it and we can see your board.
Okay. Okay, good. So we can see here, we may not know who that is, but we're looking at Pyrrhus. And so we're going to go through the Guadalupe presentation on Pyrrhus that Elder Tess did. And I don't know if somebody's, I can't keep the chat up, so if you can watch it for me, that would be. Okay, so we've been studying in Acts 27 and looking at the history of the two ships. We're going to refer back to that study often. Many of the things we discuss can be found in that study, at least traced back to it. And we found that in the Acts of the Apostles that we just read too in chapter 17. There are many things that can be traced back to it. So where it took us was into a study of the King of the South, because when we looked at this ship, we identified the south wind that preceded the east wind. And we also began to consider the number 273, and it took us into the history of 273 BC. So we know the south wind relates to 1989 and the east wind 9/11. But meaning also we have the south wind blowing now, which would mean we're going to have an east wind to blow as well. So we saw it took us into the history of 273, and then we'll see where it comes up to. So in the story of Acts 27, the number 273 is found between the waymarks of Panium and Sunday Law. Where we took it into history, we found 273 BC is located between Panium and Sunday Law. And when we look at the Battle of Panium in that history, not the Battle of Panium of Daniel 11, but how it is illustrated with the Pyrrhus War, we found that there had been a war between the King of the North and the King of the South. This was over the control of the whole of the Italian peninsula. It's Rome that took the north and is now trying to take the south. And as we read, because of this Pyrrhic War, the ancient world stood up and took notice of the rise of Rome. They began to form a diplomatic relationship with Rome. It's a direct cause and effect, the rise of pagan Rome into global attention, and is the result of the war with the King of the South. We identified that the King of the South is Pyrrhus. We're going to go into a couple of different perspectives. We're going to prove this role of the King of the South in our time occurs in two parts, an alpha and an omega. So we want to take Pyrrhus, or the king of the south, back to his first beginnings. We began to discuss that when we talked about the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. And I just want to kind of side note, off topic, but on the note of the Alpha and the Omega. I mentioned it earlier this morning when I came in, because we're being called, ever since Germany, we're being called the Omega movement. And we still don't know that we have a name, right? But
That's what I was thinking about.
But I mean, I got an email from somebody. It was a friendly email. I don't know who the person is, but he's on my email list. And he asked me, and he said it very nicely. He said, "Hey, sister, would you mind subscribing me?" And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, because if you got the email and you're replying to it, you must mean unsubscribe. So I emailed him back and asked, "Did you mean unsubscribe?" And he said, "Yes, please." And he said that he wasn't a part of this Omega movement. And it just came back to my mind again to think about the Alpha and the Omega, because they want to label us as the Omega apostasy, the Omega of Kellogg, right? That Kellogg being the Alpha and us being the Omega. So correct me if I'm mistaken when I say this, but within the reform line itself of the 144,000, each reform line has a beginning and an end, right?
Right.
What is a beginning? It's an alpha, right? Yeah. Then what's an end?
Omega.
So the reform line itself has an alpha and an omega, right? So if this is the Omega movement and it's all bad, then the alpha of this movement had to have been bad as well. But it wasn't. And no one in this movement is saying that about the first part of this history, right? Yeah. So the alpha of this history was God's doing with imperfect people. God's doing all along the way. And we know that when he plants the seed and you've got the growth of the plant is perfect at every stage. So I don't know, is it safe? I mean, whenever the time comes that the name comes, because if this is the Omega, we're continuously being called the Omega movement. Actually, I think some have redefined it as the P and T movement. Maybe they've strayed away from Omega.
Because they saw we like it.
Because they saw that it means something, that it is the Omega movement. And Jesus declared the end from the beginning. He's the Alpha and the Omega. If this is the 144,000, the line of the 144,000, they're the ones that become one with him, follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. So if it's his movement, his reform line, which they all are, but this is the movement, the reform line, then it had an alpha that was right and good, and it has an omega that is right and good. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out there. Okay.
When you say alpha and omega, the apostasy, then alpha is wrong and omega is wrong. So Kellogg was wrong.
Okay, so let's jump forward. Okay, so we read in Daniel 8 and 11:4. I don't have the verse there.
Well, that's no implication to half right, half wrong, right?
No, Alpha and Omega are just words that mean beginning and ending. So Ellen White has used it. This is the Alpha of apostasy. There will be an Omega of apostasy. But she's also used that Christ is the Alpha and the Omega, or this was the Alpha of truth, and this, there's an Omega. It's just descriptive words, like if you were to supplement it with bad or good, it's not. You're going to have two Omegas, a bad one and a good one.
Right.
And they don't realize they're the bad Omega. And so it makes me wonder what kind of ties, what are this that, because that's what I was thinking while you guys are talking, is what is it that they're doing that might be similar to what Kellogg did? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it might be, because I don't know. Pride. Yeah, pride. It was a leadership thing though, wasn't it, for him? And so it's the same with Jeff, because that is it, because he wouldn't give it up. Yeah.
Sister Susan asked, does that mean that they now abide in with death too? I think she meant in death, but yeah.
Well, Elder Tess said that it closed on them. It closed. They're not,
Yeah, they can't come back.
I still think from going through 1st and 2nd Samuel, that probably 1st Samuel, that history after Saul dies, where David goes to, and I brought this up last week, goes to the servant of Mephibosheth. He's summoned from Saul's house, and he's asking if there's anyone in Saul's house that I can show kindness to. So that, I don't know, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's hopeful that maybe some of the people that did go that direction maybe went ignorantly, as we were looking at the word ignorant earlier, that somehow they're not fully aware and therefore not fully tested, and maybe they come back. I don't know. But I don't know. Okay, so we read in Daniel 8 and 11.
Also, the Mephibosheth, whatever, he was a child, and so it could be some of the children of those who are walking away. Just saying.
But it doesn't necessarily have to mean child as in literal child either. Could still
Right.
be somewhat a child in the message. They got lured away. Is that what you just said? Did you say it that way?
I mean it both ways, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Because some people would be taken away with their family. Like if their family left, they would go with the family.
Yeah.
Whether they're young or old, they would have left with them.
Yeah.
And not realize the consequences.
Yeah. So we read in Daniel 8 and Daniel 11:4. I think it's verse 7 or 8. Is it 7 or 8? Somewhere in there in chapter 8. We see the death of Alexander is described as the breaking of the horn. Then it says that there are 4 horns that rise up, the 4 generals who take over the 4 directions of the compass, north, south, east, and west. But they are not placed until 301 BC in the Battle of Ipsus. This process by which this empire is divided in these 4 regions occurs over 22 years, and the 4 wars known as the Diadochi War. So here you have the Diadochi Wars here, the 4 wars that take place in this 22-year period from the death unto the death of Antigonus. And once you get to the death of Antigonus, you have 4 generals. So until we come to the Battle of Ipsus, we have Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, and Lysimachus from 1 Alexander to 4 horns. So in this study, we're picking it up from the 4th horn, or Diadochi War. The 3rd and the 4th are our 4 generals against 5. So the 3rd and the 4th here are the 4 generals against this 5th one, which is Antigonus, the most powerful general of this time. And as we study further, Daniel has a good logic to build this verse in this fashion to go just from Alexander to the 4 generals. Because this 5th general, Antigonus, is continuing the work of Alexander the Great. So all through this history, you still have a notable general of Alexander, Antigonus, that is working to unite the Greek Empire after this dynasty. And it's not until the death of Antigonus at 301 that the empire is permanently divided with no hope of unity. So when Daniel, under inspiration, directed the writing of this prophecy, it makes sense, and there is logic behind it, to go from just 1 to 4, because Alexander and Antigonus are doing the same work. Not until the death of Antigonus that the empire is properly divided. We'll review this more in a later study when we more deeply look at the Battle of Ipsus. So, but our main subject for the whole of this message focuses not on the king of the north, but the king of the south. It's Pyrrhus, and he becomes involved in the 4th Diadochi War. Comes in here during this 4th war. So if we were to trace the history of this 4th war, we begin to do that. We saw that Antigonus is not alone. He's fighting alongside his son Demetrius, and Demetrius becomes an important figure in the history of Pyrus. So pointing out that this 22 years missing here, we as Adventists have always just gone from Alexander to the 4, and we're looking at this history in between because it's going to give us this history of the king of the south. So in 307 BC, Demetrius begins the 4th Diadochi War. He takes an army into Athens and frees the city. 10 years before, you have this 10 years before, 317, Cassander placed a puppet government ruling Athens as a dictatorship. And in 307, 10 years later, Demetrius frees the city and they proclaim him a god. As you can imagine, Cassander was not pleased. He goes back into an alliance with the other generals, and this war is sparked from that incident. So Cassander's placed a dictator here. Demetrius is going to free them. They call Demetrius a god. Cassander then unites back with the allies to go against Demetrius. So let's see, did I say that right? As you can imagine, let's see. They all begin to fight again, our allies against Antigonus and his son Demetrius. In 303 BC, Demetrius goes into an alliance with Pyrrhus. So there's an alliance here. Pyrrhus' sister marries Demetrius, and he becomes involved in this war. This is where Pyrrhus comes into history. This alliance is utilized 2 years later at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. We saw that three of our generals, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Cassander, come against Antigonus, his son Demetrius, who is being supported by Pyrrhus. He's fighting as his general. This is Daniel 11:4, the division of Alexander's empire into the north, east, west, and south. So the Battle of Ipsus is this war that brings you down to the 4 generals. You have Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus. We know that Ptolemy was not at this particular battle. So these 3 allies are fighting against Antigonus and Demetrius is supported by Pyrrhus. So then we discussed how long it remained divided into 4. In the history of the 3rd and 4th, you have 15 to 16 years. So I don't have that screen back up here where you had the 4 Diadochi Wars, but in between the 3rd and the 4th, you have 15 to 16 years where the empire is divided into 5. That 5 is with that 5th general, Antigonus. And if Daniel wasn't taking a specific thread to make a certain prophetic point, it would make more sense to say this kingdom was divided into 5 horns and not 4. But Daniel is making one point, and we're making another. And this empire was only divided into 4 for about 3 years. A few years later, about 298, Cassander dies, and now you have just 3 horns. Just a few years after Ipsus, he dies of natural causes. He left his eldest son in charge of the kingdom. His eldest son died and upset all the plans of that dynasty. So Cassander dies, and quickly after his eldest son dies. This left the 2 younger brothers, Antipater and Alexander, to fight over the kingdom, and this very quickly turns violent. So Cassander's 2 youngest sons are fighting over that empire. The youngest son writes to 2 people and asks for help taking his father's empire. So Cassander's son is going to write to 2 people asking for help to fight against his brother, right? So we drew a map of Italy. When they divided into north, east, south, and west, who had the west? Cassander had the west. Lysimachus had the east, right? So the area, was that right? Or Seleucus? Was it Seleucus that had?
Lysimachus is in the north.
Okay. So the area they are fighting over is the land that surrounds Pyrrhus, which is in the country of Pyrrhus. This is what the 2 younger brothers are fighting over, Macedonia. And the youngest one writes to Pyrrhus. So they're fighting over Macedonia here. And the youngest one writes to Pyrrhus. He also writes to Demetrius. Antigonus has died. Demetrius has his own navy and his own territory, and he's still a king like all the others. The youngest son of Cassander asks both Demetrius and Pyrrhus to help him regain the throne of Macedonia. Pyrrhus gets there first because he's the closest, and he places that youngest son on the throne. And as a reward, this son of Cassander gives Pyrrhus extra territory, expanding his territory of Epirus into Macedonia. But Demetrius didn't want to lose this opportunity to become involved in this affair and expand his kingdom. He arrives after the job is already done. He stays around, pretending to be a friend, and then when he sees an opportunity, he kills Cassander's son, the king of Macedonia, and he takes all of it for himself. So now you have Demetrius taking over all of Macedonia, becoming the king. This was a different approach than Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus just expanded his kingdom, and Demetrius wanted all of it. So he killed the son of Cassander and took it. This is how Cassander is wiped off the map of history. His lineage does not continue this story because this kingdom is taken over by another king, Demetrius. It's just interesting to think about it when you're, we go take us back in time where all we knew is from Alexander to the 4 generals that all this history took place in order to get to that point of those 4 generals. And how the Lord saved that for us, right? To understand this. This is how we see the story of these 4 generals in Daniel 11:4 going down to 2 generals in verse 5. Demetrius is still involved because we know that Daniel 11, then the rest of Daniel 11 is the battles between the king of the north and the king of the south. So Demetrius is still involved in that breakdown. This country of Macedonia has been divided by these 2 allies, Pyrrhus and Demetrius. The son, Cassander's son, had given him, expanded his land into Macedonia. So this country of Macedonia has been divided by these 2 allies, Pyrrhus and Demetrius. And this upset Pyrrhus. He placed the king on the throne, and now he is seeing Demetrius kill his ally, and now Demetrius, who is supposed to be his ally, the ally of Pyrrhus as well, is extremely powerful, the king of Macedonia, as well as much of Greece, which is down below on the map, and now has all this territory surrounding Pyrrhus's country. So Demetrius is consuming all this area and becoming more powerful. And even with your allies, you want some distance, a buffer zone. Pyrrhus wanted some space between Demetrius's kingdom, especially since he now has become so much more powerful. So this division of Macedonia begins to break down the alliance that had existed between Pyrrhus and Demetrius at the Battle of Ipsus. She's not going into application here, but since we're kind of there with a lot of this, we know that the Battle of Ipsus was 2016, and it was the election where Putin supports Trump in helping him to get elected. But then they eventually come, the relationship begins to break down. So also Pyrrhus' sister, who had married Demetrius, is a part of this alliance. She also died, so their alliance was extremely damaged. This is first illustrated in 291 BC, a number of years later. Demetrius is becoming more and more powerful. Demetrius is king of Macedonia and has power over the whole kingdom and much of Greece. He has all those city-states like Athens and others. So we see Macedonia divided at Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus has part of it, but mostly, if I'm understanding correctly, Demetrius. Demetrius was having some trouble down in Greece. We see this is Macedonia. We've got Epirus here, Thessaly is here, and down in Greece. So Demetrius was having some trouble down in Greece. He was besieging a city, and Pyrrhus felt it was the right time to strike and try to weaken his ally. While Demetrius is down in Greece, Pyrrhus invades the middle area known as Thessaly. What he's doing is splitting up his empire. He's driving a wedge between Macedonia and Greece. So Pyrrhus is trying to put a wedge between here, Greece and Macedonia, while Demetrius is over it all. And his purpose was to weaken Demetrius's empire, but he was not brave enough to fight Demetrius directly. So Demetrius marches against him, and before they can meet in battle, Pyrrhus turns and goes back to Epirus. This is the first sign that their relationship is breaking down. This first attack by Pyrrhus against his ally when he invades Thessaly. As you can imagine, Demetrius was not pleased with his ally, and he wants revenge. He finishes besieging the city in Greece, reestablishes his control in that area, and as soon as he is free, he marches his army up through Epirus and completely ravages the country. So Demetrius comes up from Greece to go and ravage Epirus. Let's see. He comes up from Greece through Epirus and ravages the country. Pyrrhus tries to meet him in battle, and they take different roads and they don't meet. So Pyrrhus tries to meet him, but they're both on different roads and they don't meet. As Demetrius enters Pyrrhus's country to get revenge, Pyrrhus tries to come against him, instead exits his country, leaving his country undefended. So as Demetrius is ravaging his country, Pyrrhus is outside of Pyrrhus and doing nothing to defend it. That's interesting when you think about when you put these who these characters are. Just a thought, question thought, because Trump certainly isn't protecting the United States right now, right? Pretty safe to say he's not.
But Pyrrhus is Putin.
And Pyrrhus is Putin, right? So while he's not protecting this nation, Putin is having a field day.
Yeah, I mean, he's not even accepting that Russia meddled in anything. He's trying to divert everything on Ukraine.
Yeah,
He's not only not protecting America, but he's literally giving it.
yeah. Yeah. So this happened in 289 to 288 BC. Demetrius invades Epirus and does a great deal of damage. They form a temporary peace, partly because Demetrius is distracted. Demetrius is building up this massive empire to recreate his father's empire. He's engaging in a huge military buildup. He had started building a fleet of about 500 ships, an army of about 100,000 people. What Demetrius was about to attempt to do was what his father failed to do.
Sister Susan has a question.
Yeah.
She says, doesn't that leave both countries open to Islamic attacks next?
Does it leave Russia under? I don't know.
I just came in from the bathroom, so I have no clue when that.
You want to elaborate, Sister Susan?
If both countries are not being defended.
Is Russia not being defended?
Sister Susan, can you let us know some background of where your question is coming from?
Because we would have to see that Russia is not being defended.
What you just talked about, Sister Elaine.
You mean because Demetrius was not in Macedonia because he's down in Greece? Is that what you mean?
Pyrrhus and Demetrius. Yes.
Okay, because Pyrrhus is.
Yes.
Because Demetrius is in Greece as opposed to Macedonia, and that's why he was. Pyrrhus goes into Thessaly. Yeah, so I don't know if that means it opens up them for an attack. I have no idea of Islam. I have no idea.
Well, Pyrrhus, it can't happen quite yet, right? Because Pyrrhus is the king of the south. So if Pyrrhus goes to attack Thessaly, that is the south wind blowing. The east wind can follow, but the east wind hits the king of the north. I don't see the east wind hitting the king of the south in any of our lines. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. Did Susan get that?
Did you hear that, Sister Susan? Say that louder, Sister Adriana.
When Pyrrhus goes to attack Thessaly, that's the south wind blowing. So while the south wind blows, you don't have Islam yet, but it comes after. But when Islam does come, it doesn't hit the king of the south and his territory. It hits the king of the north and his territory, I thought.
And the king of the south is already out of the picture, right? Or not quite. Well, because at Panium,
He gets the blow at Panium, but it hasn't happened. But he's going to slowly weaken from now to then, and then at Panium there's a death blow, and he dies slowly until Sunday. But this was the last win. I don't know what it looks like between now and Panium until the death blow. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But right now Putin is still doing good.
So
It has to be next year that the east wind.
yeah, the east wind follows the south wind, but the east wind is a strike on the king of the north, not the king of the south.
That's what I always thought.
Okay, thank you for the input.
Okay, so he's let's see, he's building this massive. He's trying to rebuild what his father's empire. He's doing well. He has Macedonia and Greece, and he's building a huge army to threaten the remaining generals. At this point in time, 3 are still alive. Cassander has died, but there remains Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Lysimachus. And these 3 generals are nervous. They spent well over a decade trying to defeat his father and almost failing. Now they see his son as powerful as the father attempting to do the same work, and it drives the 3 generals back into an alliance. So we just saw where Demetrius invades the Pyrrhus here. We have Cassander dies at 298. And at 301, we had all 4 of them. Antigonus dies. Cassander dies at 298. And now it's just the 3 at 298. So Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Lysimachus come back together in a union, much like they had before, except now they are united to fight the son and not the father. And Demetrius as opposed to Antigonus, and they need help. So they write to Pyrrhus and they say it's the proper time now to turn on your ally and unite with us to defeat Demetrius. And Pyrrhus agrees. Now think about that. So Pyrrhus turns on Demetrius. Help us out here, Adriana, when Pyrrhus turns on Demetrius. Any thoughts on that?
What do you mean? Because there's multiple battles.
I know.
This is the line of Macedonia, so you have the king of the south winning twice. This is an alpha history of failure. So it's going to end with the king of the south winning.
Okay.
Right? So he turns on Demetrius, and then him and Lysimachus make a deal to take over Demetrius's territory.
Okay.
And it ends with the king of the south winning, but that's because it's an alpha history of failure. It's not that he wins, but it's that he doesn't get destroyed, basically. Because
Okay.
Lysimachus ends up taking most of that territory, and the king of the south is just kind of left there.
So in 301 BC, Pyrrhus is in an alliance with Demetrius to defeat the 3 generals. And that's here. And when we come into the history of 287, Pyrrhus switches sides. Now he's on the side of the allies to defeat Demetrius. And this happens in 287 BC. That doesn't ever mean then that Putin turns on Trump and goes with the 3 allies as we know them in government, right?
No.
To try to defeat Trump?
In our line, Putin is trying to always defeat Trump, but you'd have to look at the model of Pyrrhus versus Italy.
Okay.
Because that's the one where it has the right battles and how they work.
Okay. So in 287 BC, Pyrrhus marches into Macedonia. So you got Pyrrhus here is marching into Macedonia from the west and meets Demetrius in the middle. He's not the only one fighting this campaign. Lysimachus marches from the east. So you have Lysimachus coming from the east. So Demetrius is in a vulnerable position. His empire of Macedonia is in between that of Pyrrhus and Lysimachus. When they unite to defeat Demetrius, so when Pyrrhus and Lysimachus unite, Ptolemy and Seleucus are not involved in this, even though they are part of this alliance. It's Lysimachus from the east and Pyrrhus from the west to come against Demetrius. When Demetrius's army sees Pyrrhus and Lysimachus coming, they choose not to fight, even though they are an incredibly powerful army, because they have no love for their king. Demetrius's behavior had created a condition where his army was not loyal to him. When they see these 2 powers coming, they refuse to fight for Demetrius and capitulate to either Pyrrhus or Lysimachus. And Macedonia is divided into east and west. So Demetrius is going to be out of the picture. Macedonia is now divided between east and west with Pyrrhus and Lysimachus. As Demetrius flees, his army surrenders without a fight, and his country is divided between the east and the west. This is the end of Demetrius. Soon after, he was taken under house arrest, and he died in house arrest. This is the end of his attempt at that empire, surrounded by his own people in this division between east and west. It's interesting that Demetrius isn't included when this takes you beyond Cassander's death, right? Did I follow that correctly? Takes you beyond Cassander's death.
It does because he died already.
Right. So now there's a new tension, not with Demetrius, he's no longer part of the picture, but now Pyrrhus has a new enemy right on his doorstep, and that's Lysimachus. The Empire of Macedonia is divided in the middle. Pyrrhus controls the west and Lysimachus the east. Lysimachus isn't content with just half, he wants the whole of Macedonia, the Macedonian Empire. Lysimachus wages war with Pyrrhus to take the whole country of Macedonia. But it's not a conventional war he fights. He chooses a different method. What he's going to do, instead of fighting with arms, he's going to weaken Pyrrhus from the inside. And the war he fights is a cold war for about 2 years, from 287 to 285. Lysimachus intentionally undermines Pyrrhus in the portion of Western Macedonia. The work that he is doing is to turn the people against their new leadership. He wants them to reject Pyrrhus as their king. He sends people into the western part of Macedonia to the different cities and turning them against Pyrrhus subtly and slowly. So Lysimachus sends spies into Pyrrhus's territory, and they start to ridicule the people that this king from this tiny little country that has always been controlled by Greece to some extent now rules over Macedonia. Macedonia is the portion of the country that gave the world Alexander the Great and his father Philip. The people are proud of their heritage, and what Lysimachus is able to say to these people is that you're being controlled by the king of this little insignificant country, the relatives who none of you want to admit you have. This portion of Epirus, also Greek, has never held a great deal of power, and their king now rules over these cities that are proud of their heritage, Alexander the Great and his father Philip, and these cities slowly turn against Pyrrhus, their king. Lysimachus uses one other technique. Pyrrhus was stationed in this country, Western Macedonia, and Lysimachus starts to create trouble for his supply lines. So Pyrrhus is stationed here in his country, in this portion of Macedonia. He starts isolating this portion for trade. If we would have used those different concepts in today's language, we would call that subterfuge. Undermining from the inside, cutting off trade, we would call sanctions. These are the two elements of a Cold War. And by the time you get to 285 BC, Pyrrhus is so weakened in Western Macedonia that he is forced to give everything up except his own country. And he goes back home and surrenders all of Western Macedonia without a fight to Lysimachus. This is 285 BC. You've got a Cold War going on between 287 and 285. You got subterfuge and sanctions. In 285, Pyrrhus goes back to his country of Pyrrhus and gives up all of that Western Macedonia that he had. So our understanding in the movement for some time was the idea that in the breakdown of Alexander's empire, Lysimachus defeated Cassander, and then Seleucus defeats Lysimachus. And that is the process by which the four generals become two generals, Daniel 11:4-5. But when we go into this history, it's an oversimplification, factually incorrect, to say that Lysimachus defeated Cassander and took Macedonia. There's a story in here about Demetrius and Pyrrhus. Demetrius defeated Cassander, or actually his son. I put a question mark in there because I kind of got lost when she first said that, but I had to go back and review the notes. So Cassander had died and it was his son that was over, and the two sons, one of them wound up being king. Pyrrhus put him on the throne. And then Lysimachus and Pyrrhus defeated Demetrius. Then Lysimachus defeats Pyrrhus. We have expanded on this story of the breakdown of Alexander's empire. It doesn't just go from Alexander to 4 to 2, but rather there's a story here. And each of these stories are lines that then teach us our history. So when I got confused there about the son, what she said, it was a point where you couldn't hear. Sometimes you can't catch a word that there was one word that she said that I just couldn't catch, and it was that she was talking about the sun. So I just put some of this in here, and we'll go through it. Go ahead and read it. It was just from A.T. Jones, The Great Empires in Prophecy. Cassander died in 298 BC and was succeeded by his son Philip, who himself soon died, leaving two brothers, Antipater and Alexander, to contend for the kingdom. Antipater the elder murdered his mother because she favored his brother for the crown. Alexander called to his aid Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, and Demetrius, who had again been deprived of all his eastern possessions and was in Greece besieging its cities. Pyrrhus establishes Alexander in the kingship, reconciled Antipater, and returned to his own dominion before Demetrius arrived in Macedonia in 294 BC. When Demetrius did arrive, Alexander informed him that his services were not now needed. However, Demetrius lingered, and before long compassed the death of Alexander. Then, as the Macedonians would not have Antipater to be king because he had so foully murdered his mother, Demetrius persuaded them to accept himself as their king. Antipater fled into Thrace, where soon afterward he died, and Demetrius reigned 7 years as king of Macedonia, 294 to 287. In those 7 years, Demetrius built up an army of 100,000 men and a fleet of 500 galleys. At this point, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Seleucus became alarmed and set about to check his further progress. They secured the alliance of Pyrrhus, whose dominions bordered Macedonia on the west, and who, of course, could not consider himself safe in the presence of Demetrius in possession of such an army as that. Lysimachus invaded Macedonia from the east and Pyrrhus from the west. The troops of Demetrius all deserted him and joined Pyrrhus. Demetrius made his escape in disguise, and Lysimachus and Pyrrhus divided between them the dominion of Macedonia, 287 BC. However, Lysimachus soon succeeded in sowing such distrust among the soldiers who had lately gone over from Demetrius to Pyrrhus that they now went over from Pyrrhus to Lysimachus. This so weakened Pyrrhus that rather than to contend against the power of Lysimachus, he with his own, apparatus, and original allies retired to his own country of Epirus. This left the whole of Macedonia to Lysimachus, who formally took possession of it and added it to his dominions. Demetrius succeeded in raising another army of 10,000 men and a fleet to carry them, and made a descent into Asia Minor. He landed at Miletus, marched inland to Sardis and captured it, but was compelled by, I think we can skip that one, that goes on to another story. So it's part of him, but more of what happened, but we're going to skip through that. So where Pyrrhus's campaigns in Macedonia end at 285 BC is with his defeat in a cold war with Lysimachus. No open battle was fought, but what Pyrrhus has left is the borders of his own country. He has all his original territory he had back in 303 BC. What he lost was that of what was expanded into Western Macedonia. So the story of Pyrrhus in Macedonia ends in 285 BC. Pyrrhus has lost everything except his own country, and he doesn't see any hope or point of trying to take any more territory in the direction of Macedonia or Greece. He doesn't have the power to defeat Lysimachus or Seleucus or Ptolemy. So he changes his scene of action in 285 BC, where he expands now to Italy. We're marking a change of scene from Macedonia to Italy. So Pyrrhus is down at 285. All he has is Epirus.
So that first line of Demetrius and Pyrrhus, that takes you to 1989. Because you have a Cold War that Lysimachus fights against Pyrrhus through sanctions and subterfuge. He takes all of his territories, and all he's left with is Russia. Or Epirus.
Is that where we mark that?
Yeah, partly. Because you have that history of World War II in there. And then I think she made an application because you have like a Cold War in there. Yeah, because the next line that she starts with, you have that little time period before, and then you start 1989 and go forward with the history of Italy.
But don't you take these?
Yeah, on one level. So
Oh.
you can take the long history of Macedonia, then Italy, and stack it on top of World War II and now, and you can.
Or
break
you
them
take
apart.
those two histories and put them both in our reform line, right?
Yeah, but always when you do that, remember the first one is an alpha history of failure.
Right.
That's the thing.
Okay.
So the first Macedonian War and World War II are both alpha histories.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you guys, hopefully you guys can hear that when she said that.
So those two match up more, and then ours with the Italian battle matches up more, because they're both histories of success. The
Okay.
other two were alpha histories. But they all have something they can teach us for our line, so that's why we match them all four of them.
You know, when Parminder said in, I don't remember what, a recent presentation, I'm trying to remember what it was, but talking about following progression and repeat and enlarge and having to juggle both at the same time. It's very hard.
It is exactly like that, because the two long ones are progression more,
Right.
and then the four would be line upon line. So
Right, and it is a lot to juggle in the mind, and I know that it's hard. You can only take it in bits and pieces, and then have it and pray that the Lord would take those bits and pieces that you get here and here and here and here and bring them all together, because it's very hard to juggle it all in your mind at the same time. Progression and repeat and enlarge. By this stage, independent to Pyrrhus, Italy itself is divided into north and south. Rome has control of the north, leading up to 285 BC. They have battle by battle defeated all the other tribes of the north, but the south is built differently than the north. The north has tribes, but the south is Greek, the same nationality you have in Greece, relatives of Pyrrhus. So you have the north, it's all tribes. Rome is over this whole territory. But in the south, you have the Greek city-states that are a part of Greece that are settled here. So in the south, Italy, we see Greek city-states. The premier city-state is Trentham, and that's here, located in the heel of the boot. It has a sphere of influence over each of the other cities. Trentham is protector and leadership of all the other cities in South Italy. Thurii is another city located on the other side of the Gulf. So you have Thurii, and you've got this Gulf here in the middle, Trentham, and then Thurii. Thurii is another city located on the other side of the Gulf. The Gulf of Trentham. I think I looked it up and it said Tarentine. Anyways, so the Gulf of Trentham, named after its premier city of Trentham. The city of Thurii has internal problems. It has conflicts within itself. The problem with Thurii is that the city's politics are divided between two factions. So internally, there is a division. So within Thurii, there's two factions. Much like two political parties. One party is called the aristocrats, and the other party is known as the Democrats. Where these two political parties disagree is over who they want to ally with. They're threatened by neighboring tribes, because Rome is wanting to invade and take all over the whole south. They're threatened by neighboring tribes, so they need to be protected by someone more powerful than themselves. Do they ask or come under authority of Trentham or of Rome? Traditionally, they would be under the protection of Trentham, but at this stage in their history, they're not noticing Rome and its power. The aristocrats are driven by trade and wealth, and they say it's better economic prosperity if they ally with Rome. It's better for their business. The Democrats are more concerned about their heritage. They are Greeks, and it makes sense for them to ally with Greece or Trentham. Because if they do not ally with Greece, how can they trust that Rome will respect their nationality and traditions? So the Democrats are driven by patriotism instead of finances, and they want to ally traditionally with Trentham and their Greek heritage. So this is the internal split inside of Thurii between the aristocrats and the democrats to ally with Rome or with Trentham. In its internal conflict, the aristocrats win. And in 285 BC, remember 285 was the same time you saw the subterfuge and sanctions, and Pyrrhus winds up with only a Pyrrhus. And in 285 BC, they send messengers to Rome saying, we are under threat and we would like you to protect us. So this moves us from Macedonia to what is happening in Italy at the same point in time. The same point you have Thurii allies with Rome. So 285 Thurii allies with Rome. That history is a little bit vague, but we know they appealed more than once to Rome for protection. So at the same time that Pyrrhus gives up everything without a fight to Lysimachus and winds up just with his own original kingdom of Epirus, you've got this going on between Trentham and Thurii. Thurii then allies with Rome.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Going back to, stay on this page with this map here. Earlier, you said that Rome was always trying to come into here and take over southern Italy. But maybe that's true. You're right. Maybe it's true. But I was wondering because I transcribed this, and when I got the understanding that Thurii, because it's divided by the aristocrats and the democrats, and that traditionally they should be under Tyrentham's umbrella of help or have ally with them, but the Thurii, the country or the city wanted to, half of them wanted to be under Rome's ally, and some of them wanted, and the other half wanted to be under Trentham, because they were afraid of neighboring people coming in to overthrow them. I was under the impression it would have been the other cities, the other territories in southern Rome, like all those little dots, that would be their threat, not Rome. But you had given the implication that it was Rome that was the threat. Then my question would be, why would some of them want to ally with Rome if that's the case?
If I can back up and find where, because I had the same thought go through my head actually as I was reading through this when I said what I said, because there was a comment that she makes, and I think it was the previous slide, and I don't remember where it was, but she says that here it is right here. But at this stage in their history, they are not noticing Rome and its power. So they're wanting to ally with Rome, but they're not noticing. I might be stating it the wrong way, but Rome is in control of this whole territory. They had back in the previous slide, we went battle by battle. They had taken over this whole territory. They have northern Italy. But at this time, the South has not recognized Rome and their strength. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it totally makes a lot of sense.
So Rome would want to go in here because Rome wants to conquer this area anyway. So it seems like it plays in Rome's favor to lure Thurii into, hey, come with us. Because Rome wanted this whole area anyways. I don't know if that's the right way to say that.
It's just an interesting blurb in history, because as you read on, there's a treaty between Rome and Trentham anyways. It's an old grandfather treaty.
Right.
And so when Thurii allies with Rome, it kind of throws that treaty out because they go and attack anyways, which is crazy. Right. Like, this history is really interesting to me. I was really getting into it, but I don't understand some parts of it, unless there's parts of the history that's missing in the details that we don't have, but there's some open gaps that don't make sense.
What'd you say?
What part doesn't Ali understand?
No,
oh, never mind. I don't know. I understand, but I just have some questions. Why the history is just, it seems like their history is just beginning at this point, because Rome has honored that grandfather treaty that they made with Trentham up until Thurii asking Rome for protection. I don't understand why Thurii never understood that there was an ally between Rome and Tarentum to begin with. That's one of the gaps in this history that I don't know.
Allie, they knew that there was a treaty. The problem was that every single one of those Greek city-states, there were two factions. One who wanted to be a part of Greece because that was their heritage, and the other side was interested in Rome because of the economic gain that they could get. And then you had those barbarians attacking Thurii, and they didn't ask, because I don't know, they weren't strong enough. So they decided to ask Rome for help to fight those barbarians, even though it was going to trespass the treaty, because they didn't want to pay any allegiance to Tarentum. They decided against Tarentum because they had two choices, either Tarentum or Rome. They decided to go with Rome for economic wealth reasons. And that's what happened there. And so that violated the treaty though, and then you have a war, and that's what happened. But
So, okay, I think I understand.
if you remember, because Tess went over that.
Because Rome was conquering those barbarian tribes, correct?
Rome was a new up-and-comer, but it was really strong. And because of how many people it had, it was like this military force that if like 100,000 people died, they could have replacements by Friday.
So Thuri's under threat from the barbarian tribes that Rome had conquered in the north. Is that correct?
Thurii was, yeah.
Okay, so Thuri's under threat of the barbarian tribes, and Thurii is one of these Greek city-states, and inside Thurii there were two factions. One that wanted Rome, and at the same time though, Rome wanted to conquer southern Italy and have the whole of Italy. Is that correct?
They were growing in strength.
They were growing in strength.
And
Who are the barbarian tribes? Is it north of Rome?
Yeah, that's a whole nother study, but yeah, they were north.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you.
northern Italy.
Yeah. So a couple of years later, in 282 BC, so we've got this 285, you've got the Pyrrhus going back just to his own territory in Pyrrhus, and at the same time, Thurii allies with Rome. In 282 BC, you have Tarentum attacks Thurii. So a couple of years later, in 282, Thurii is again under threat. They again appeal to Rome's protection, and this time Rome is much more bold. This is where they break that treaty. So Rome has an ancient treaty with Trentham here, where they agreed to not interfere in the affairs of the South, and particularly that Rome would never sail its ships into the Gulf of Trentham. So Trentham had already entered a treaty with Rome to restrain their influence, but as Thurii appeals to Rome for help in 282 BC, Rome breaks this treaty. They're much more bold, and they march down to Thurii and place a garrison. Rome then takes over the city of Thurii. Then they sail ships into the Gulf of Tarentum, directly antagonistic to Tarentum. Tarentum responds by attacking Thurii. They send their army. They punish the city for turning against them and choosing Rome. So Tarentum attacks Thurii and expels the garrison and attacks these ships. The response of Tarentum was violent. So the ships sail in, they're ships of Rome. Rome breaks the treaty that it had with Tarentum and comes in here to defend Thurii and protect Thurii. And so Tarentum attacks Thurii for going with Rome as opposed to with them. Did I say all that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this all happened in 282, this second appeal of Thurii to Rome. Because of this conflict, Rome declares war on Tarentum. Now there is war between Rome and Tarentum. But while Tarentum is powerful, it's not that powerful to fight Rome, and they know it. So they do what they have traditionally done and ask a relative to fight for them. They send ambassadors over to Pyrrhus, who at this stage has nothing to do, no hope of taking Macedonia. They ask him to fight Rome on their behalf. In 280 BC, 2 years later, Pyrrhus agrees. He loads up his ships and heads for Trentham. He begins to take military control of that city and prepare it for war with Rome. He starts to shut down their places of entertainment, forcing the people to begin training. He's making preparation for war with Rome. Pyrrhus is now taking control of southern Italy. He's making alliances with the city-states, trying to unite them to make them one force to face Rome. He has barely begun this work of prep when he learns that Rome is already descending on the south and coming to fight. He isn't yet ready. Pyrrhus does not want to fight yet. He's just arrived and the people are not ready. But Rome is not going to wait for him to get ready. And they fight this first battle later in 280 BC against Pyrrhus's wishes. This battle is fought near the location of Heraclea, and it's known as the Battle of Heraclea. Rome attacks Pyrrhus. So start taking note of all the details as they become important with our structure. This battle is initiated by the north. Rome comes against Pyrrhus, but Pyrrhus wins it. Why does Pyrrhus win it? When he left Epirus and sailed over to Trentham, he took with him a new mode of warfare. On board those ships were 20 war elephants. This was not a method that Rome was used to using. In fact, isolated over here in Italy, they had never seen an elephant before. Imagine what you might be thinking. So they didn't know of this kind of animal before. Even though Pyrrhus is not prepared to fight when he comes against Rome at Heraclea, he doesn't have the people already, doesn't have them strong and all united yet. He charges his 20 war elephants. As the Roman soldiers see the beasts charging them, they get scared and run. They've never seen elephants before, and Pyrrhus won because of using a new mode of warfare, and his warfare was elephants. So when was another battle that was won because of elephants? And this is separate from all this, but that was Ipsus in 301 BC. And Rome wasn't a part of that battle. Where did you say Ipsus was at? Over around near Turkey?
It's in Turkey.
In Turkey, okay. So what decided that battle? Seleucus drove elephants between Antigonus and his son Demetrius, leaving Antigonus undefeated until they could kill him. Elephants decided the outcome of the Battle of Ipsus. They decided the Battle of Heraclea as well. So we've got the just quick review, and she'll do it again at the end. But 317, Cassander places a dictator in Athens, a puppet government. 10 years later, Demetrius frees Athens, which starts the war. 303, there's an alliance with Demetrius and Pyrrhus. 301 is the Battle of Ipsus. Elephants decide the battle there. You've got Cassander, Seleucus, and Lysimachus, the three allies, versus Antigonus and Demetrius. And Demetrius has got an ally of Pyrrhus. Macedonia then here, in between here, in this period of time, Macedonia is divided. We just read a whole bunch of that history. Pyrrhus invades Thessaly. 289 to 288, Demetrius invades Epirus. And 287, Demetrius is now over all of Macedonia. And Pyrrhus attacks Demetrius from the west. Lysimachus attacks him from the east. Then you go into a Cold War where there's subterfuge and sanctions. And then at the same time, change scenes at 285, you have Thurii allying with Rome. Pyrrhus winds up with only his land of Epirus. In 282, Trentham attacks Thurii. And in 280, Pyrrhus arrives in Trentham to help fight Rome. Rome doesn't wait for Pyrrhus to get ready, but Rome attacks Pyrrhus. But Pyrrhus wins because of elephants. So start taking note of all the details as they become important with our structure. This battle is, I think we just read the whole thing. Okay, so we're done. So here's just a quick map. We've all seen this particular map, but this is the Battle of Heraclea here, in this, right in here. So, right, is that Heraclea on that dot? You might have that right. So you got Trentham and then Heraclea. So this battle was fought in the late autumn. This Heraclea was in the late autumn. That's kind of interesting because when was Heraclea in our time?
Late autumn.
Yeah. So both sides, Rome and Pyrrhus, are unable to continue their fight. When Pyrrhus defeats Rome at Heraclea, He is emboldened by that, and he decides to make a direct attack on Rome. He unites his allies and marches north. But winter comes and he is unable to continue his victory. So both sides go home and settle and prepare until winter is finished. So after the first Battle of Heraclea, there's a period of time. Quietly, both sides, the north and the south, are preparing for war so they can begin again in the spring. They meet again the following year in 279 in Asculum. Pyrrhus came over to Rome, comes against Rome, and who wins? Pyrrhus. If you go into the story of that battle, he wins. Why? 280 to 279 BC is a time period of winter, and Rome is trying to build some kind of weapon for war to defeat this new tactic of elephants. In this history, they build 300 carts or chariots known as anti-elephant carts. 300 carts complete with spikes designed to pierce the skin and loaded with people with flamethrowers. They built these carts with all the elements that would frighten or injure the elephants and place them in the field of battle where the elephants are going to charge. And this was just one of the maps I found, or drawings of their battle. So you've got the elephants, Pyrrhus has the elephants, and Rome has the anti-elephant carts. In the Battle of Asculum, Pyrrhus attacks Rome, and Pyrrhus wins because of elephants.
Poor elephant, sister.
I know, I was thinking about that last night. What we do with the animals. In the Battle of Asculum, the carts were broken up and trampled on by the elephants. They are ineffectual, and this tactic does not help Rome. Pyrrhus is again victorious. The Battle of Asculum, because both sides were prepared for this battle, was twice the size of Heraclea. Asculum was fought over 2 days, and it's twice the size. The elephants are the cause of victory for Pyrrhus. Even though Pyrrhus was victorious, he loses a lot of men. Though he is winning, he's also being weakened by this war. And Rome is quickly able to replenish its army. It's believed at this point that Pyrrhus said a phrase that became famous. He says that if he was to win one more war, it would be the end of him, because even in victory, he is weakened as his army is shrinking. He lost many men in those two battles. Today, we have the saying Pyrrhic victory. This is a victory that the winner is so weakened that it's not much better than an actual defeat. Pyrrhus is weakened and does not want to face Rome again quickly. In 279, they go into a treaty, or really just a ceasefire, and Rome agrees to hold back for a period of time, and Pyrrhus decides on another tactic to further his cause. So after Asculum, they go into a treaty. And what is Asculum on our line? Nobody remembers, or just not want to say? What is Asculum on our line?
2019?
Yeah, 2019. Raphia. So down below Italy, below the boot, is Sicily, which was under dictatorship or control by North Africa, Carthage. Carthage had taken control of Sicily, and Sicily wants to be freed of this dictatorship of a foreign power. Sicily sends ambassadors to Pyrrhus and asks him to leave his war with Rome and sail down to Sicily and free them from Carthage. This is where Pyrrhus's plans change a little. Pyrrhus is winning against Rome, but he can't sustain it. So he forms another plan. He's going to go down to Sicily, take control, and build an immense navy. Then he's going to use this navy to go down to Carthage in North Africa and defeat them. Once he has Sicily and Carthage, he can use this strong navy to sail back around to Greece. He can take Greece, defeat Seleucus, Lysimachus, and take all of this country, Macedonia, and sweep back and take Rome. So he wants to come in here, free them from their dictatorship, build his strength up again, go back over to Greece, take out Seleucus and Lysimachus, and sweep back around to Rome. So he can take Greece, defeat Seleucus, Lysimachus, and take all this country, Macedonia, and sweep back to Rome. His plans have not gotten smaller. He's just got a new strategy on how he's going to expand his empire. Instead, he's just being short-sighted and taking Rome. He starts to see, instead of just being short-sighted and taking Rome, he starts to see this plan where piece by piece, he can take Sicily and Carthage, build his immense navy, and sweep back around in a circular motion to Greece and take Macedonia and then back to Italy. So much for how we live in this world today where we want everything right now. You're able to see the long range and try to work your way through bit by bit, you know what I'm saying? Whereas we all want everything right now. I don't want to say we all, but society is like an instant society. What we haven't mentioned is Pyrrhus's heritage. Alexander the Great's father was king of Macedonia, and Alexander's mother was Olympias. Where did Olympias come from? She was the princess of Epirus, and she was Pyrrhus's great aunt. And I put over here to the next what it actually says, so we'll, because she wasn't sure about it being a great aunt. Pyrrhus is a direct relative of Alexander the Great through Alexander's mother. He is known now in history by later generals like Hannibal. Great generals of today look back to Pyrrhus as being one of the greatest generals ever known, as great or almost as great as Alexander. So Pyrrhus, even though he's consistently failing, is known as one of the 4 or 5 greatest generals in history. It's no surprise he lives for war. All he wants is to be the next Alexander the Great. He has a direct blood relationship to that history. That endeavor begins when he is 17 years of age, when he goes into an alliance with Demetrius. So these are both from the same Wikipedia page. Pyrrhus was the son of Acides and, I don't know how to say that one, Pythia, a Thessalian woman and a second cousin of Alexander the Great via Alexander's mother, Olympias. So a second cousin of Alexander the Great via Alexander's mother. So in the life of Pyrrhus, Plutarch records that Hannibal ranked him as the greatest commander of the world had ever seen, though in the life of Titus Flaminius, Plutarch writes that Hannibal placed him second after Alexander the Great.
Sister Christine put some things in chat. She put, hold on. Agreed, over time, the animals we are supposed to be taking care of have been abused and hurt for our benefit. It is shameful. I'm not sure where that.
Back when we were talking about the elephants.
Oh,
Probably.
got it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's commenting on Sister Lana. And then Sister Ali put, Hannibal was a Carthaginian or Carthaginian.
From Carthage.
Carthaginian, whatever. General and statesman who is widely considered one of the greatest military commanders in history. His father, Hamilcar Barca, was a leading Carthaginian commander during the First Punic War. Is from Wikipedia, in case anyone wondered who Hannibal was.
He was the one who went over the Alps. There's a huge story over a long winter, and the fact that his people even survived is like a huge thing in history. He crossed the Alps, and I thought, because I was looking at the Punic Wars and their battle between Rome, and it looked like it might have application too, but it's interesting. I don't know though. I don't have time to go into that history, but Carthage was almost the thing that this whole world is based on, not Rome. They were really powerful.
Okay, so beginning in 303 BC, he goes into an alliance with Demetrius, right in the time period of the Fourth Diadochi War, which began in 307 BC. From 317 to 307, being a 10-year proxy war, this is just a quick review. Over Athens, Cassander placed a dictator. Demetrius freed it 10 years later, sparking conflict. 303 BC, Demetrius goes into an alliance with Pyrrhus that becomes of use 2 years later. And we know that the alliance that comes into use, this alliance, this is 2014, that becomes in use here in 2016, the election. In 301 BC, Pyrrhus fights as his general at the Battle of Ipsus. Antigonus coming against the three allies, Antigonus and his son, who is backed by Pyrrhus. Antigonus is killed. Demetrius flees and immediately begins to rebuild. Macedonia is divided between Demetrius and Pyrrhus. Their relationship begins to break apart. That crack is first visible when Pyrrhus invades Thessaly in 291 BC, trying to weaken his ally. Demetrius responds in 289 BC, invades Pyrrhus. There's more to that history, but it's a period of conflict and they don't physically fight. Pyrrhus backs down. Our three remaining generals who are alive, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus, they're threatened by the power that Demetrius has developed. They go into an alliance with Pyrrhus and they take down not the father, but the son, Demetrius. It's Pyrrhus and Lysimachus that do that work, defeating Demetrius without battle and dividing Macedonia between themselves to east and the west. This sparks a Cold War. Lysimachus uses sanctions and subterfuge to drive Pyrrhus out of the west, and Pyrrhus is left with the borders, only the borders of his own country. At this same year, there is a change in scene, but we're moving location from Macedonia to Italy. There's two factions inside Thurii, the Democrats and the aristocrats, torn between who they are allied to. Their traditional relatives or this other power in the north who offers greater economic benefit. They choose the north and the south invades, and Trentham attacks Thurii. Thurii now becomes permanently dependent for the protection of Rome in 285 BC. They're no longer safe with their relatives. So this sparks a new war for Pyrrhus to deal with between northern Rome and the Greek city-states, and the rest will be reviewed in the next study. Any comments, questions, or thoughts?
Funny, these generals never find rest. They're always planning and
War. Yeah, it's like anything else, it seems like in life. We have the mentality to know these truths, to be right with God, and so we put everything into that, and that's how we spend our time. They have that mentality to want to rule and control the world. And that's where they put their time into.
Look at how many people die because the ambition
I know, of one person.
Yeah,
and animals as well.
that's, yeah.
And the animals, yeah. Yeah.
And even going back to over till we dropped that A-bomb, look at all the vegetarian we destroyed. I mean, just not the plants and the people, but there's no plants there for that grow, and when they do, they don't go back the same.
Yeah, it's sad, and they're still doing that. Like when I really looked into what they're doing in the Amazon and cutting those trees down, you know, to grow soybeans, it's just really just sad. Like they destroyed a whole Amazon, like the part of it where they're doing all of that, and it's irreparable damage that they're doing.
And it's an area that is part of the balance of the whole ecosystem, right?
I mean, just to profit off of it, to create some soybeans.
It's interesting to think that how God strategically placed everything where it is that keeps this earth in balance.
Right.
So when it comes to saying that we're destroying the earth, more ways than we know we're destroying the earth. We're destroying the balance that he designed.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I don't know, we're finished with this early, so I don't know if anybody has anything they want to do, discuss, or what have you, since we're finished kind of early.
Sylvan wrote something in chat.
Yeah, Victoria's on top of that, I think.
Oh, well, yeah, I think his sister Donna or brother Renee put watch Cowspiracy on Netflix. Could you give us like a short summary of what that is about?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
That is one of the best documentaries on what's happening with not just the cows, but just all meat and what the production on an industrial level, on a worldwide industrial level, just like what Victoria was talking about. You watch that documentary and I challenge you to continue eating meat because it is literally it's a major factor of causing the what do you call it, the greenhouse gases and in climate change. I mean, we were never meant to eat animals on this kind of a level, on this scale. It is unbelievable. So I encourage all of you to watch it, and just watching that makes you never want to eat meat again or dairy. And dairy is the same thing. You eat dairy, you're contributing to it. Same thing.
Have you watched the one called Earthlings? Have you ever heard of that one?
Yes, I watched that one too. That's a good one too. But
I watched that one, and it literally brought me to the point of tears, to where I had to bypass a whole section of that movie, which was really interesting because it was around the time of the fish and the tumors on the fish. You would think there were other parts that would have been done it to me, but I had to bypass that section. But if anybody's, not whether or not we need to at this point, but yeah, we're destroying.
And what we're doing, what Satan has done on earth, what we're doing to the planet, the earth, the animals, God's creation. I mean, there isn't an area at all that Satan has not completely destroyed. I mean, you just look at these, and who are these people that are doing these videos? I mean, it's very painful, just like you were saying, Elaine. It's hard to watch.
Yeah.
And if your heart is not pricked, you got to ask yourself, has your conscience been seared where you can watch these things and not have any kind of reaction? When I was an evangelical Christian, that's the one thing that bothered me, because, we would have these, luncheons and potlucks, and it was just full of meat, barbecue and everything. And when I would talk to them about how the animals suffer, they didn't even care about the suffering of animals. They didn't care about, they said, they somehow justified that, God, allows us to eat animals, and animals are here for our benefit and for us to use them. And I just was so totally troubled by that, because I thought, people are totally lost. They have no heart, and God, these animals they are subject to us,
That kind of sounds like same mentality as slavery.
It's the same exact, when it comes to research, a few animals have to die because it's for our benefit as human beings. And so, these are the things. It's wrong. It's a wrong mindset. And Phil, you're right. It's the same exact mindset. It's not just slavery for human beings. It's slavery for all God's creatures.
I came straight out of the world, and I was a total meat eater, and when you talk about having your conscience seared, I never thought about it at all. I mean, to me, I grew up with the whole mindset that that's what the animals were here for. You couldn't have told me otherwise.
That's exactly what they would say. And it was just so, I would tell them, okay, watch this video, watch this documentary. There are so many documentaries out there that there's no excuse for us to be eating and killing animals on the scale that we're killing them. And we don't even do it humanely.
No.
These animals suffer tremendous suffering before they die.
And it's so big, this people's life is in jeopardy to make some of this.
There was one video, I don't know if it was Earthling, it might have been one of those. They interviewed one of the butchers, or the guys that slaughter the animals. And he said and this is a very rare thing, because normally these guys just don't, they don't come out and say anything, because their minds have been seared. So they do it every day, all day. And he said that he was killing the baby calves, and so he had to put the gun, air gun to the head, and one calf looked up at him, and a tear came out of the calf's eyes. And after that, he took the gun and he gave it to his manager. He goes, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. It's done. Because in his heart, he didn't realize that these animals, have feelings.
Yeah.
And when he saw that baby calf with a tear for the first time after, a lifetime of slaughtering animals, he realized these animals have feelings. And he couldn't do it anymore.
And they know what's going on.
They know exactly what's
If he had a tear, he had to have known what was going on.
Yeah, the animals were, it's just horrible. But anyway, that was a small little reprieve that I just thought, wow, that's great, because that's hard for a person like that. A lot of times they're getting the worst types of people to do the slaughtering of these animals. And I mean the worst, that have to be able to do these terrible things. They can't even get people now, they can't even get Americans to slaughter animals. They've got to use immigrants, and they got to threaten them, and they got to do all kinds of stuff for them to go work in these absolutely despicable places, that kill animals on a constant basis. All for what? For people to eat meat.
Well, for money as well.
Yeah.
For money. And it's interesting too, though, that the Stones are crying out that where the Seventh-day Adventist Church failed in the health message,
Yes.
the world is sounding the alarm.
Mm-hmm.
We have a
When I was an evangelical Protestant, I already knew something's not right. I didn't believe in eating meat and killing animals. If an animal's got to die for me to eat, I ain't eating them. And then I come to the Seventh-day Adventists. I'm so relieved because of the health message. And then, like most of the I would say a big majority of them, they eat meat and dairy. And I'm so shocked.
Oh, yes, we do. We eat our meat and cheese. I'm like, okay.
It's very discouraging.
Yeah, we have a couple of comments in chat. You have Sister Allie. A lot of people resonate with you, Sister Donna, on this. I mean, I do too, but I'm just saying. It was a reality when I saw plastic bags floating out in the blue ocean in Costa Rica a couple years ago, and a turtle swimming in the water near that bag. It's so real what's going on. That's Sister Allie, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. And God is, so no one on, against the Nethinims that are doing these videos and these documentaries, because their hearts have not been seared. They have a right mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, the word is out. People know, they have the knowledge. They can make the decision to make the right choice and not feed your appetite,
But as I agree totally with all that you're saying. But here's the thing: as Elder Tess says, it is "Thus saith the Lord." So it depends on how you read it, and and we know that they're reading it all wrong. But that's how they read it. It's "Thus saith the Lord."
It has everything to do with how they're reading it, and they're reading it wrong.
It's same with slavery. They don't know God.
Yep, they don't.
If they knew God, then they would understand and be able to read it correctly.
I mean, if you read Desire of Ages, when Jesus was in his youth, I mean, he would, if a little bird had a wing, he would go and he would, help the little bird. I mean, Jesus had that mentality even with the creatures,
Yeah, Sister Lana says, despite of what people say, trying to write it off as impulse, animals have feelings and they understand things much more than we can give them credit for.
Yep.
Sister Susan says, this topic reminds me of how many serial killers begin by first torturing and killing.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, Sister Lana says, you hit it on the nail. You hit the head on it. Sorry. You hit the nail on its head. Sorry. Susan, yeah.
I used to tell people, some of my, when I was a Protestant, a lot of these Christians, they had animals at home. They had dogs and cats, and I would tell them, well, what's the difference between your dog and cat? Well, why don't you just eat them? And they'd be like, oh no, we could never. And I said, well, they're animals too.
And it's so funny, not to put this out there, and it's not funny as in humorous. Yeah, it's interesting, funny that you have and the some Filipinos at my job, or some Filipinos I know, they'll kind of laugh and say they how they eat cats and dogs, too.
Yeah.
So some people just really do eat any and everything, and they're not saying, and they're saying it, laughing and whatnot, but I can't judge their heart, but they just, that's kind of part of their culture, that's what they know to do.
And some of them don't do it, but the ones who like talk about how they laugh, you know, it's kind of like when blacks talk about how, you know, eating pork feet or whatever else, you know, chitlins or different things, you know, or whatever they eat, you know, they kind of, it's disgusting and they kind of laugh. Some do laugh at it, but it's just kind of like a part of the culture and what they ate. But yeah, it's really interesting. Sister Ali says, I met a third generation SDA the other day, and know nothing about not eating meat. She really didn't. We shouldn't eat. What?
A third day.
Let me say that.
Never say it, yeah.
I can say it better. I'm sorry. I write it real fast and sloppy. My apologies.
I got it.
I met, and she was in her 20s. She's a third generation Adventist, and she had no clue that we have a health message on not eating meat. Health message, period. And so, like earlier, the conversation is, if you don't know God, you don't have that education. If you don't have that education, you don't know. But the world is crying out. The rocks are crying out for them to see it. They'll hopefully see it.
During the Sabbath school, Sister Adriana mentioned something. I can't remember her exact words, but she was saying something about the Seventh-day Adventists. You know, we don't even have a good moral message anymore. She said something to that effect. If she's listening, maybe she can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we profess to be the moral high ground of all the world, but even that we don't do as well as the people externally to us sometimes.
Right, and I agree with you, because it's only been a year now since we've come out of the church and not have entered into a General Conference Seventh-day Adventist Church. But I do know, you know, as we were leaving in the last years, you know, people want to go back to eating meat. Logina, for a long time, you know, when we went in 30 years ago, our potluck was just horrible. And over the years, you know, we did a lot of health message. And Logina, she was a potluck director, and we changed the food around, encouraged people to bring in healthier food. And for the past, I would say, for the past maybe 10 years, maybe, I would say, you know, food has gotten more plant-based, not as much cheese, no meat, you know, all the good stuff. And then we have a pastor come in who wants to reintroduce meat back into our potluck.
Wow.
And destroy. Yeah, that's a pastor.
Wow.
Who wants to reintroduce meat again. And then we have people, you know, when you say that the new people or converts have not heard about health message, you're right. It's not only the health message, it's any of our doctrines they haven't heard. We have, you know, like people who should know better that speaks about going to heaven or implying to going, you know, they don't say it out directly, but it's like implying that when we die, we go to heaven or things like that. They're people who shouldn't have been talking like that. And that's what they're saying. So yeah, we don't even have a good moral message anymore. Not, you know, forget the prophetic messages. We don't even have a good moral message.
Yeah.
You're right, Phil.
You know, Phil, one of the head guys from the Sister White estate from England, which came to our church because he's of a European descent. We had a lot of Europeans going there. He was jamming about, oh, are you a vegetarian or do you eat meat? Oh, I still eat meat. It's because we do a lot of traveling. Is that the excuse why you still eat meat? Now, in regards to eating meat, I don't know if you can play it forward and sneak it, but I like to play it forward and keep it the same. Do not drink the blood thereof, which is the life thereof. Now, I don't know if you want to cancel it out and say it's okay to go ahead and eat meat, This meat is not properly drained. If it was done the way it was supposed to be done, you wouldn't touch meat unless you put 2 pounds of seasoning in it. It is flat and dead tasting. I mean, flat and dead.
Yeah.
So
blood.
as Adventists, we call ourselves, we eat the clean meats, the beef, the chicken, and this and that, but the blood is not properly drained. And that is, and we read in the Bible, me and my son had a disagreement on that. That is sinful eating meat, according to the Bible, when you understand it. Do not drink the blood thereof, which is the life thereof. Now, are we supposed to shut that down, shrink it, and play it back? I don't know. I'd keep it the same, maybe enlarge it a little bit. Like we do most of our studying. Blood is not to be eaten.
And I think Sister White, and don't quote me, she even talks about that if the blood is not drained properly, even if you're eating, well, so-called clean meats, it's just as bad as eating pork.
Yeah.
If the blood is still in, not properly drained.
Now, I don't know where God done away with, okay, let's go ahead and drink the blood now.
But
I didn't see that in the Bible
today
anywhere.
we can't eat anything that's living because it's all polluted.
And most of our potlucks are vegetarian, but a lot of the people there at our church eat meat. Yeah, we still eat our meat and cheese and dairy products. I'm like, okay. They look at us like we're crazy because we don't, but whatever.
The potluck would be vegetarian, but when they went home the rest of the week, most of the parishioners were eating meat.
They even said it.
I have a praise.
Go for it.
Yeah, my nephew texted me last night and asked me about the difference between if I was a vegetarian or vegan. And I told him that I was a vegan, and I just gave him some information about how when I was 220 pounds and got the health message, and how I got healthy and all this kind of stuff. So him and his wife are investigating to have a lifestyle change. They want to change.
That's where the Holy Spirit is working on people, and the stones are crying out. And as for those Seventh-day Adventists that are meat eating, I don't know. I know that I haven't looked at the passage for a long time, but she talks about the meat eaters. It's impossible for them to. I don't remember how she phrases it, but impossible for them to be translated, I think is the way that it said. But I don't know if they'll necessarily be lost. But so we don't know who might be among them that might be Levites, that the Lord will strive with them. And always our prayers to be whatever witness we need to be, that some might wake up from what they're doing.
Well, when the angels finally do come to rescue us at the end of our last little ministry, this says your bread and your water will be assured. I didn't see steak and eggs there nowhere.
Yeah.
Bread and water.
So on that note,
Lunchtime.
we'll break a little bit early and maybe come back early if everybody's okay with that. Not so we can go eat meat, no. But we'll break a little bit early, and we're going to come back and open up prayerfully. Everybody's got their lots of prayers for when we go into this next study, that we can start really digging in practicing parables, because I really believe that it's understanding not the morality of the parables, but the prophetic side of the parables that we need to understand. And it's through the prophetic understanding of parables that I believe that the 144,000 are going to be coming into union. As we were talking earlier, though we may be having our differences here and there, we're going to be all one in doctrine. And we need to be able to hear his voice and hear and understand parables prophetically. So during lunch, maybe think on that. And then because that song that we're looking at, it's a Psalm of David in 2 Samuel chapter 22. It's a song of deliverance, and it's telling his experience, because the 144,000 are going to sing a song of deliverance. And that song of deliverance is going to be their experience. And as David puts it in his experience, and Deborah does in others, and others have done it, Moses, that in this song of experience, you see the trials and the workings of God, and the workings of God as well. You'll see in this particular psalm that the workings of God, how it actually does produce two classes of people. So keep that in prayer for when we come back, and we'll all be prayerfully really interactive with it. And maybe we'll be able to talk Sister Adriana into helping on the notes when we get there. But if not, somebody take notes. And I printed up for me and kind of had it in front of me throughout the week. And as I did some of my morning studies, I tried to go through. It's like some days I'm completely blank, and other days there's a whole bunch that comes to my mind. So anyways, prayerfully we'll get a lot of good understanding out of it. So let's go ahead and break for lunch. We'll pray first. Sister Tony, would you like to pray?
Okay. Holy Heavenly Father, happy Sabbath, Lord. God, as we come together, we are ever so grateful for all that you have done for us and are doing with us, teaching us, helping us to grow better, more, to give us your Holy Spirit, which causes us not only to learn and to know, but also to see our condition and to realize, Father, that there is nothing more in this world that we want than to be in your presence. I'm sure many of us just cry night and day, Father, because our wants and our desires are to be with you. But Satan has a way of coming into our lives and trying to put us in total darkness. But we know that you have given us your marvelous light, and we want to walk in there. And we don't want to follow Satan. We don't even want him by our side. We ask for your legion of angels, Father, to be with us, surround us, guide us, direct us, to keep us in the faith, Father, never wanting or doubting anything that you have promised us, like Satan wants us to doubt. I thank you for the message that we were listening today, Father. I thank you for the for what we're going to learn later with the parables. It is something that is necessary because they're just so very important. We need to know them. We need to teach them. We thank you for bringing us about and being able to do all these presentations, Father, because this is not only serious, but it's teaching each and every one of us as we present, and it's helping us in so many ways. Father, from the bottom of my heart, I love you so very much. We cannot live without you. We don't even want to live without you. We don't even give Satan his credit because there is no credit to give him. You have given us such power and such faith and such hope. And the things that you have been teaching us are so strong and so true that we know where we're going. We know what we have to do, and we want to go through it. Whatever you take us, Father, whether we die, whether we go to jail, whatever it is, Father, we know it will be for your glory. We know that we are here in your service, and we accept the challenge. We love the challenge because we know where we are going. We ask for prayers for each and every one of us, not only for ourselves, but our family members, our friends, for the Nethinims, the Levites. Father, you have your children out there everywhere. I know you are going to make us stronger and stronger every day. We just need not to ever let go and never have doubt. Please help us, save us from ourselves if we do get low, because you could always bring us out of it. That is who you are. We love you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.